come and spend this next few hours with us. For those who don't know, my name is Dr. Chika. I'm privileged to be the convener of this wonderful monthly seminar, WTAL. The WTAL means Woman Thou Art Loosed. And so in terms of just wanting to talk about it a little bit, give all our first timers, a bit of a background. A few years ago, about 3 years ago in 2020, after having been in multiple roles across the city, I am privileged to teach at universities here in Canada, in University of Calgary and in Athabasca University. Also own a couple of businesses. I'm a pastor. I wear all these different hats. You know, I'm a mentor in some organizations and all these different things. I realized that one thing kept on recurring. And every time I met a young lady or a young person, they asked me questions I couldn't quite answer. One of the questions was, so what do I do with my life? How do I know what to do with my life? How do I know what my passion is? How do I know what I should do in terms of a profession? Is it my talent? Is it something I'm good at? Is it something I already have a natural skill in? They asked me, how do I balance my life? You know, what I find that happens most of the time is that, you know, for a woman to have a family, she needs to step back from career a little bit. You know, we are constantly needing to forego something for the other. So these questions kept on coming at me, you know. How do I know that I shouldn't be an entrepreneur? How do I know I shouldn't own a business? Why is career or employability the thing that I should follow through versus, you know, owning my own and building my own business? So all these questions that kept on coming took me to my desk to sit. And what I did was kind of, you know, distill all these questions into a couple of categories, you know, and what I found was that the things that were predominant were people's inquiries about passion. How do I discover purpose, and how do I sustain my passion in something? Because it's one thing to start an idea, but it's a completely different thing to see it through, watch it grow, watch the hurdles attached to that idea, and be able to overcome them. So that's one thing that we decided that we should focus on, is how to discover purpose, how to pursue purpose, you know, and be passionate about what you're doing. The other thing, which is very commonplace, but we're adding a little spice to it, is about career. You know, how do I grow in my career? What are the things I need? What are the tools I need? So one thing we've decided to do at WTAL is to go into the city and find women who are succeeding in all these different careers, nothing in particular, and then hear from them based on experience. Because one of the best ways to learn is by listening to people's experiences. So we bring in women who have risen to the pinnacle in all these different professions, in banking, in oil, even politicians, anyone who has thrived in the place that they are, so that they can teach others how to get there, because they found that certain tools are tested and trusted. So the first is purpose and passion. The second is career. The third is about businesses. We've had a fantastic lady come speak to us here who, you know, defied the odds and has built a 17-year-old successful business in architecture. You know, and the business, you know, overcame that very trying period of COVID where everything was kind of doubling back or dying, and still continued to thrive. And so we had so many questions to ask her. What exactly is the entrepreneurial spirit? Do I need that to succeed in a business? How do I know that I have it? So we had her come here, and a series of other women who are also, you know, who have built businesses and, you know, continue to replicate that across the city. We've had her come here and she gave us so many nuggets, fantastic things. We've also had the executive director of CRIEC come here and speak to us about her own life experiences on how she was able to kind of break through the limitations of, coming into a male-dominated space, which are very critical in excelling in the society that we live in now, where many times, women are passed over because there's the general conception that men always do a better job. They don't have kids, they have more time, So those ideas and how to overcome them are things that we had someone come here and teach us about. Also, we've had someone come here and tell us how to build our community. Networking is a critical part of success in any sphere. It doesn't matter where you work, as an academic or a professional, engineer, lawyer, you need to network, you need to build a community. So we've had someone come here and talk about it, how necessary the community is to success. And she spoke based on her own experiences, having to have built her own community for almost 14 years to get to the level that she is. We also had a young lady come here and talk about how to succeed quickly. Because many times we have people talk about success, but they attach all these decades to it. And then it overwhelms you because you say to yourself, do I really have 20 years in order to get to executive level position? Do I have that time? Some people don't. And if you're like me, I like to do things quickly. So we had a young lady who came here and spoke about, how to really hit the ground running on the ideas you have and how to really see that growth come about as quickly or as rapidly as possible. So what we're doing here is really trying to ensure that our community of women are living lives that are very full, very accomplished, very content, and is very well balanced as well. So we want women to know that you can have it all. You can have a business, you can also keep a job, you can have a family, you can do the things you want, and everything can succeed at the same time. So we're bringing people to show us that these are possible. I attended a very meaningful seminar, I want to say 3 weeks ago, where the panel was just so fantastic because there was this diversity that I think is necessary for women to see. So there was an Olympian who was present on the panel. There was someone else who has started a business in an unprecedented space. So what she is selling is happiness. So she's the first ever across the globe to have a business that focuses or centers how to find happiness. And then, so she was there. There was someone else who we know to be phenomenal. Many of us also know her by name, Sue Rydell Rose, who is the CEO of Perpetual Energy here and who has been well awarded as a very extraordinary businesswoman. So it was just a very diverse group to show people in the audience that, you can succeed in your own right. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what does success look like to me? What is my own definition of success? Not everyone wants a family, and that's fine. People just want to succeed in their careers. They want careers where they can literally die building. They want offices where there's a shower, there's a gym, so they don't need to go home. And that's their own definition of success. People want to be able to go to a job, work for 6, 7, 8 hours, go home to children, clock in their own personal businesses and check what's going on with that. Our definitions of success are all different. So that's a very necessary start point, is to define what it looks like for you first. And then, find the people who have already accomplished the things that you are wanting to accomplish as well. And there's a lesson to learn. So that's why this idea of women empowering women is so robust and has really grown and become a thing of its own, because there's no better example than to see a woman who has done it already and who is willing to talk about how she has got there. So that's what we're doing at WTAL, is really bringing the image of what you see in your mind so that you can hear from them, so that you can also apply the tricks that they found to be very beneficial. So that's what WTAL is about. And we convene on the last Saturday of every month. So we've been doing it for 3 years, and it's been fantastic. We've had several testimonials of women who have decided that I think I should own my own business now, because I know that that's where I should be, which is why I don't find contentment in employment. There's women who are saying, you know, I now know what exactly a career would demand from me, and I think I can take it. You know, so there's clarity that is arising from these seminars like this, which is the goal of what we're doing. We want people to be, you know, to be aware, to be intentional about the steps they're taking towards the goal that they've set for themselves. Yeah, so on that note, I'll go into a very quick other thing, which is about donations. I don't know how many of us received a notebook and a bookmark from the front desk as you came in. On the flip side is how you can donate. So all these 3 years, if you look at, we're in a very gorgeous space. It's very nice. Every once in a while, we do have a fuller room, you know. But yeah, so we've convened for 3 years, and we've never really asked for donations until now, when we found out that what we're offering to the community is fantastic. We have speakers here who are typically paid to share what they're going to share with us tonight, but who are coming to do this just because they also believe in the idea of women empowerment. And so are willing to take out of their lovely weekends. It's so nice out today. Yeah, it's so nice out to come here and really speak to us. So we're going to ask you to please generously contribute to our cause. And no pressure. We only want you to do that if you found today to be beneficial. So if you can, at the end of the day, just right before you step out, or while you're enjoying some refreshments, just think on the last few hours and say, oh, did Lana really kind of speak to me? Did Jennifer say something that really kind of resonated? Do I feel like I'm leaving here with new knowledge? Do I feel like when I leave here, I have something else to share with someone who wasn't here, that they will find equally as beneficial? Only then are we asking to now dip into your purses and just give us a little something to kind of further this cause so that we can keep this cycle going. We don't want to succeed by ourselves. You know, Lana is here just because she wants to replicate herself in the community. Jennifer as well. Yeah, she wants other people to also rise to director levels in organizations, same as me. You know, I want other women who want, oh, I see Dr. Chika, I aspire to be that, and, you know, having heard from her also has given me this desire and drive to do something like that. So we are so passionate about raising the next generation of women who are going to be super strong and super present in the community. And we know that this is one way to do that. So please, before you leave here tonight, just kind of ask yourself that question and say, well, did Dr. Chika make any sense? You know? And if I did, or Lana or Jennifer did, please pick up your bookmark and then send us a little something. We're very grateful for any support we get. So on that note, I will dive right into the activities for the day. So we have two lovely women going to speak to us tonight, Lana Bentley and Jennifer Keable. Lana will come up first, but we're going to have an introductory video play so that should you not have read her bio online, then you can know exactly why she's here discussing all these valuable nuggets that we know is beneficial for everyone else to hear. She will come up first and talk about one of the most important things in the world today, mental wellness. Is so critical. And I also want to ask that as she speaks, please put down your questions. When they're done speaking, we're going to have a fireside chat, and they're going to answer all your questions. We want you to be sure that you've left here with something. So not just taking all this information in, but also asking questions, you know, so that you can clarify things that were a bit confusing or a bit too much. After which, we'll have Jennifer come up. Typically, we like to take interludes between speakers, but we're going to have them speak, and then we'll take that interlude where we can now kind of have, you know, a little networking session, have some snacks, take some photos, you know, just have a quick chit chat, and then we can come back for that discussion session where all your burning questions will definitely be answered. So on that note, can we play Lana Bentley's introduction video?
Lana Bentley has worked as the Director of Strategy at YW Calgary since 2016. Prior to that, Lana worked for Alberta Health Services for nearly a decade, primarily in child and adolescent mental health. An award-winning therapist, Lana earned her degrees in social work from the University of Calgary. A believer in the transformative power of post-secondary education, Lana has proudly taught at Bow Valley College, the University of Calgary, and Mount Royal University. Lana has spent her career creating impact at the individual and community level, a perspective that is maintained by her unwavering belief that everybody has the potential to thrive. A woman of varied interests, Lana sits on different boards including the Calgary Black Chambers, Youth Central Calgary, and the College of Opticians. In her spare time, you can find her adding to her ever-growing shoe collection, cheering on the Toronto Raptors, or skiing at her favorite hill, Sunshine Village.
Can we welcome Lana Bentley to the podium?
Hello? Can everybody hear me? Thank you so much, Dr. Chika, for that warm welcome. And anytime I see my biography, it's just a reminder of how much older I've gotten. So thank you for that. I'll dive right into it. As you saw from the biography, I'm actually a family therapist by training, and over the years I kind of worked my way up, and now I'm the Director of Strategy at Calgary's longest serving and largest women serving organization, and that's been a lot of fun. And I also teach very part-time at the university, or Mount Royal University, and I've taught there for so long that when I started teaching there, it was a college, and I went to teach in a horse-drawn carriage every day. It's always great when students say to me stuff like, what was it like to go to school with Freud, Lana? And they're not thinking he was my instructor, but that we were classmates. And so, as you saw, I'm a loyal but often disappointed fan of the Toronto Raptors. I'm a real basketball nerd, so that brings me a lot of joy and pain in my private life. So, if it's okay, I just wanted to get started with a little story that might help to orient my remarks that are yet to come. After working as a family counselor, and I did a 2-year stint in a personality disorder clinic just because I was really interested in trying something new. But after working as a family therapist in eating disorders for a number of years, I worked my way up to become a clinical supervisor. And then finally, I became a unit manager. And so I managed an inpatient psychiatric unit for children and a psychiatric emergency room. And it was certainly a very impactful experience, and one that definitely made an imprint. But the story I'm going to tell is when I moved from, I think, the 3rd floor to the basement where my new job was as a unit manager, because that's where the unit was. And so I used to be a really enthusiastic cyclist. And so I'd ride my bike to work, and I had gone up that dreadful hill to get to the hospital. You all know the one. And so I would carry my stuff in a backpack. And so for 6 or 7 years, I had this backpack that over time had become quite dilapidated, had a lot of dog hair, because I have 2 little sheep dogs, had a lot of dog hair on it, and was discolored. because of all the moisture. And when I would come into my office, I would just drop it on the floor very quickly. And so my friend, who was the medical director, psychiatrist at my old clinic, she came to visit me during the first week of my new job as a unit manager. And she saw this backpack on the floor. And she's, you know, what is this dreadful bag? Like, where's your briefcase? And I said, no, this is my work bag. And she said, so you're now a unit manager, you've moved to this really important part of your career, and you're still carrying around this discolored, dirty, ripped and tattered backpack. Why are you doing this, Lana? And I said, well, you know, it's all those things, but it's also really just nice to know that when I put it down in the wet or the mud, it won't make a difference because it's already ruined. And so she looked at me and said, buy yourself a beautiful bag and be careful where you put it from now on. I share that story because it's kind of a metaphor for life. How many times have those of you in this room tonight not valued yourself, and as a result, you're okay to be in environments where your fabric is degraded? The importance of what my colleague said to me is that the difference that makes the difference is when you have something of value, you believe in its beauty, and it's something worth protecting, you will protect it. And so from that point forward, in my career and in my life, and I do want to clarify, I did go to the Coach store, and I bought a beautiful bag, and I still have it to this day. Now here's the thing, I've gotten myself a couple of other nice bags along the way, and I'm not here advocating for, excessive spending, but I do think there's something to be said that as a woman, for much of the early stages of my career, and even when I advanced it, I didn't treat myself as a valuable, beautiful bag. And I was not necessarily that careful what situations I put myself in. And now, not only am I more careful about the situations I put myself in, but I also don't want to be that puddle or that mess that degrades the fabric of those around me. And I've tried to govern myself in a way where when people are in my presence, I don't degrade their fabric, but I build them up and I help them preserve and build and value and appreciate the beauty and the preciousness that they have. So what I'm going to talk about today is mental wellness as a foundation for thriving. And I would just leave that question for all of you. Does anybody here tonight need to get that bag and be careful where you put yourself from now on? That made a difference for me, and hopefully there's something I can offer you this evening that will be helpful for you. So just to dig in, is there any way to advance this to the picture of the flowers? Is that okay? And I promise you I don't have a lot to say. I wanted to start off with a quote from Shakespeare. I'm kind of a nerd. I didn't put that in the bio because I figured you'd be able to tell within moments of me starting to speak. But I want to leave you with the quote, "What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." There's a lot of language that we use to talk about mental health. You know, there's mental wellness, mental illness, mental disorders, etc. And I think that some of those terms can be so scary and overwhelming that we may not feel comfortable talking about our mental wellness, you know. So part of what I like to do is just offer the reassurance that the only prerequisite to having a state of mental health or mental wellness is just to be alive. Everybody is working towards a state of mental wellness. And everybody experiences peaks and valleys along the way. It's a completely natural part of being a human being. Now, what's different is that a mental health disorder, or a mental illness, if you will. I'm so sorry. I guess should I hold it further away, Chika? Okay. Okay. So when we're looking at, I used to have to do a lot of this when I still saw clients, because people would just be, you know, beside themselves sometimes, worried about what does it mean that I have this label. And so I just want to say that from my perspective, everybody is always working towards a state of mental wellness. And there are some parts of your experience that will be better than others. So it's not you're either mentally well or you're not. It's more like a continuum, and everybody from time to time has a little bit of a dip. Something doesn't become a mental disorder or a mental illness until there's the subjective, the objective, and a specified period of time. So in order for it to be a mental illness proper, you would need to have an experience where you as an individual are saying, I don't feel well. Those around you are saying, I've noticed that it seems like you're struggling. And those symptoms have persisted for a specified window of time. So the good news is, most people who notice peaks and valleys in their emotional state, that's just a normal part of being alive. And I say normal in a really loose sense. Normal is just a setting on your dishwasher. It really does vacillate from person to person. But I wanted to share that because I think sometimes the language of disorder and illness can unnecessarily alarm people and make them reluctant to talk about what's going on for them. Do you want to trade? Sure. Thank you so much. So, the other thing that I would say about mental wellness, and as Dr. Chika explained, you know, part of this is about contributing to your community in ways that are really meaningful, is one of the biggest disruptors to our economy actually is when people aren't investing in their mental wellness. Mental health disorders are among the top 3 reasons for people accessing both short-term and long-term disability in their places of employment. So mental health and mental wellness are concepts that require not just our attention, but our immediate attention. And certainly with all of the excitement over the last few years, we're starting to notice that there's a bit of a ripple effect in how people are doing. Perhaps you have friends and neighbors who just seem a little bit different or a little bit off, or they're not able to solve problems or rebound from difficulty as well as they would have. You know, part of that is because when there's something that happens at the community or even population level, we think of that as like a shared stress, a collective stress. And the challenge of the last few years is that, you know, you think about the fires and the floods, those are all unique and catastrophic examples of, like, you know, a trauma. But there's some distance, you know, and we were able during those periods of crisis to have people who were not affected by those things come in and help us. The last 3 years, the people who were providing help and counsel and guidance were also struggling and impacted by the very same issues that we're facing the folks coming to them for help and replenishment. So it's been a tough few years, and that's totally okay, and I think there might be a ripple effect of that that we see for several more years. So I just wanted to say, just because, you know, I've talked to a variety of different audiences, and sometimes people will say, with all this mental health stuff, Lana, isn't it just about people being tough, you know, and just kind of getting over it and not being so over-emotional? And I think I struggle with that framing for a couple of reasons. I think being over-emotional has been a term that has been applied to women in the workforce, and at times has been used proactively before we even say anything to, as Dr. Chika referenced, sound the alarms that maybe a woman wouldn't be appropriate for this because it's too high stress, and you know how over-emotional they can get. The thing about being over emotional, and I said there's those regular peaks and valleys, is that in my experience, when people struggle to regulate their emotions, they're either like a volcano, where you can see the hot lava coming from them and the emotions are very visible, but there's also the opposite, which is an iceberg, where we know there's something going on for folks, but for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable sharing it. And build up can unfortunately lead to blow up. We would do better to support people at work around their mental wellness. And the reality is, for a lot of working-aged adults, you spend a considerable chunk of your time either at work or going to and fro work, right? And so it's really important that we become supportive and aware of mental health concerns so that we can support our workforce as well. So if we just go to the next slide, please and thanks. When we talk about wellness, yeah, that font, and I'm a middle-aged lady myself. I don't know what I was thinking with that tiny font. My sincere apologies. But I'm going to read out each of those little bubbles. When we think of wellness in a more general sense, we're not even looking at mental wellness necessarily. We can see that there are many components that factor into that. There's physical wellness, intellectual wellness, emotional, social, spiritual, vocational, financial, and environmental. And just to sort of break those down, physical wellness means, are you happy with where your body is at? Are there aches and pains that maybe you need to look into and face head on and take some committed action around those? When we talk about intellectual, is your brain busy thinking about the things that you want it to think about? Are you stimulated? Is your sense of curiosity, are you able to grow that and stimulate your mind? Emotional, how are you feeling? What have you noticed about your feelings? And are you able to recognize them and relate to them in a way that feels good for you, or are you constantly stuffing your emotions down? Social. Do you have relationships in your life with people who are for you? And when I say for you, I don't just mean cheerleading without any kind of feedback, but are these people who help you grow? Are these people who are honest in their interactions with you? I want to touch on that part a little bit about the importance of having those honest and open relationships, you know. So I have a bionic ankle. It's this one. I know you couldn't tell just by looking, but it has a lot of metal in it, not gold or silver. It's not valuable. But I had a broken leg in high school, and as a result, I have a bionic leg now, and I did not listen to my physiotherapist or do any of the exercises, folks. So suffice to say, as an adult, because I love skiing, it started to give me some problems. And so I went to go see a trainer at the gym about my balance, okay? And so this is one of those boutique gyms downtown. I'm feeling really good about myself. I show up and the trainer says, I'm not sure if you've seen, if you've been to a gym, there's those Bozu balls. So they have a flat base and like a rubbery dome, and they're squidgy. So he says, get on the Bozu ball and don't fall off. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of weird. Don't know what this has to do with him assessing my balance. Then he gives me one of those really big exercise balls that people sit on. He says, now hold this ball, stay on top of the other ball. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm paying for this. And then he says, now really try and stay on, Lana, because I'm going to punch the big ball to try and knock you off. And so I'm standing on there holding this ball. He's punching it, and every time I fall off, he says, get back on quick, get back on. And it was a very humbling experience. And of course, you know, when you go see a trainer and they say, oh, are you in shape? Are you athletic? Yeah, great shape, great balance, I ski. And so at the end of it, admittedly, I was quite embarrassed. And so I put it down, hopped off, and said, wow, this isn't good. And he says to me, what do you mean? You've got great balance. I said, but I kept falling off. And he said, Lana, you don't measure balance by never losing it. You measure it by how quickly you recover if you've lost it. The same thing can be said with your relationships. You don't measure a relationship by the absence of conflict. You measure the strength of your relationships by your ability to recover when there's a difference of opinion. And quite frankly, that recovery process is where a lot of growth can occur. So when we talk about those social relationships, I would just say, who are the people in your life that give you the opportunity to practice the recovery, to become more skillful, and kind of keep you on your toes a little bit? So then we move to spiritual wellness. What fills your bucket with meaning and purpose? And are you connecting with faith or spirituality in ways that feel good to you and make sense to you and recharge your batteries? There's vocational, there's financial, and then environmental. Are you where you want to be? Are you happy with your surroundings? And are these surroundings, remember how I said when I opened it, I now I'm careful where I place my bag. I'm careful which environments I put myself in. Are you in an environment that supports your growth and development, or are you in an environment that's messy and degrades your fabric? So when we think of wellness, I would invite you to think about those different domains. Now, if we dig a little bit deeper into mental wellness, it's kind of the same thing, but there's a few different variables that I'll give to you. Autonomy. Do you have the ability to make choices in your life? Now, I want to be honest. I think sometimes we confuse autonomy with like, well, that means I can't be married or have a partner or whatever. No. I think autonomy is about getting to make choices, and somebody who celebrates you being able to use your power in the ways that you want. So I don't think you need to be alone in order to be independent. But again, going back to that relationships piece, are you with somebody and people who celebrate you making choices? And do you have the ability to make choices in your life? Do you have opportunity for personal growth? Do you like who you are? And this is a really, really big one, is do you have a sense of purpose? I think having that sense of purpose, it's such a big thing, but what gets you up in the morning? And when you reach a stage in your life, when you have fewer years ahead of you than you do behind you, if there's something, folks, for each of you that you want to do, and you've been delaying it or denying it, what is that thing? What's that thing that you want to make sure you don't look back on and regret not having done? So those are some factors that contribute towards mental wellness. Notice I haven't really talked about stuff that I went to school for, like therapy. Therapy is a helpful tool. But one of the most powerful things I used to tell people when I was a therapist is that your life, when you leave this room with me, will be far more influential than what I say. I just become another supportive person who's a part of your journey. But if all those other things aren't in place or you've been neglecting them, and I think as women, there can be an invitation to prioritize the needs of others over ourselves. It can be easy to sort of put some of those other things off because we want to nurture those around us. I think two things can be true at once. I think we can be leaders in family and community and be a strong female voice, but recognize that in order for you to have that strength to give, you A, need to receive it, and B, need to invest in it, So in terms of mental wellness in the community, are we able to go to the slide with the Calgary cityscape, please? How are we doing in Calgary with mental health and wellness? I'm going to give you one of the things they taught us to say in school. It depends. If you've ever wondered how therapists are being trained, it's on how to nod slowly and how to say stuff like that without really ever answering the question. I'm just kidding. But in terms of how we're doing, it depends, and I know that this is about women's empowerment, but my guess is some of you have men in your life who also count on you and benefit from your leadership and your voice. So some of the comments I will make will refer to how men are doing in the community as well. You know, I think in terms of how are we doing as a community, as a city, not surprisingly, I think the last few years have hit people kind of hard. So issues like depression, anxiety, and substance use, those sorts of challenges are present. In terms of the cost, I think earlier I said this is a big cost to the economy. It's about $51 billion a year according to Alberta Blue Cross. And if you're wondering where that money goes, it's in healthcare, social services, and supports for people due to loss of income, due to their mental health concerns. So certainly this is a big disruption to our economy as well. So in terms of Alberta specifically, for us, we're in a bit of a unique position because even pre the pandemic, just with the change, you know, the vulnerabilities of our economy, with that downturn, that was definitely a challenge and was destabilizing household financial security. And so that downward trend for a little while, in combination with the disruption of the last few years, has led to a bit of a trickier picture in Alberta. And, you know, I think in terms of gender, certainly male unemployment does have a very profound impact on the family unit. But similarly, that economic downturn, you know, when we look at studies about who are the first folks who tend to lose their jobs when there's economic disruption, unfortunately, women are among those groups that tend to have the most precarious employment. So all that to say, it's a little bit complicated. Certainly alcohol consumption, Alberta, I'm just going to read a little quote here. Alberta's alcohol sales were nearly 43% higher than the national average during the first year of the pandemic. You know, I think for folks who struggle with substance abuse, quite often there's a hole on the inside, there's some sort of traumatic injury, there's big feelings we're trying to escape, and how some people approach that, and it's not a good long-term solution, obviously, but numbing with drugs and alcohol, you know. So similarly, domestic violence has been a bit tricky the last few years as well. So if we just go to the next slide, in terms of women's mental health, it's interesting. All those concerns that I talked about, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, those were certainly present for women, a little bit higher than their male counterparts. Women were about 2.4 times more likely to be taking medication for sleep disturbance, mood disorders, and anxiety disorders over the last few years. Part of the challenge that women face is they wear many hats and they play many roles in their community and their family. And so the stress of caregiving and multi-generational caregiving. So aging parents as well as little ones who need a lot of supervision and support. Women working in service industries and particularly helping professions that didn't stop during the last few years, right? And so nursing, people working in shelters, children's services, even retail environments, you know, it's been tough the last few years. So for women's mental health, I wouldn't say it's super dissimilar, but there were just some added considerations, you know, precarious employment, having multiple roles and expectations for caregiving for family. Little bit more difficult for women of color, particularly for Black women. I don't know if this is of interest, but you know, there's been studies and polls that have been done, and Black people are a little more reluctant to engage with mental health services. And one of the things that apparently would be a game changer there is people said they would be more likely to seek mental health services if they were receiving them from a practitioner who looked like them and could share in their experience of the world. And so certainly you know, when I started working as a therapist in, not going to say the year, you know, there wasn't a lot of diversity, and I don't know that it's changed too much now, but it's better. And so if we go to the next slide, you know, I try not to lean in too heavily to a lot of statistics, because they tell us a part of the story, but not the whole story. So yes, I just painted a picture. And I do want to say that, you know, in my line of work, one of the principles that we talk about is the idea of radical acceptance, meaning before you can make any change at an individual level, community level, or system level, you need to embrace the reality of what is. And through the embrace of that what is and the reality, you can now make a choice for yourself. Change versus acceptance. Is my current circumstance one where I would do well to take a break and safely tolerate what's going on around me without making it worse? Or are there things that I can do to try and constructively influence the outcome? When we're able to see clearly enough to make that distinction, effective choices tend to follow. So I'll just ask each of you to consider, thought experiment. Can you think of a time in your life where you were faced with some sort of adversity and you tried to control everything and it didn't work? Now let's do the flip. Have there ever been times where you've been faced with an opportunity where you could have done something, but something held you back and you didn't take that committed action, and that didn't work either? So one of the biggest things that I've worked on when I used to see clients, patients, families, was being able to have that presence of mind to be able to tell the difference of, is this a situation where I need to safely tolerate what's going on and ride that wave, or am I in a position to take committed action? When we get the answer backwards, a little bit of drama tends to ensue, so it is good to know the difference. But in saying all that, there's never been a better point in time to take action about our mental health, you know, and particularly for women. You know, 10, 15 years ago, we knew less. And part of that is we just didn't have as much information about the brain. It used to be the case that we couldn't study the brain until somebody had unfortunately expired. I know that's so gross. But now with brain imaging, we're able to learn more about how our noggins work. And we've been able to take that information and say we now know what helps our brain function really, really well, and what are the things that impact negatively healthy brain development. We know that exposure to adverse childhood events has a profound impact. So, you know, if you think about your brain as a staircase, and you can tell I've worked in a children's hospital here, right? I got to get better examples that are like more adult specific, but you know, sometimes when I would have to explain to parents because their kids would be freaking out and they would say, I don't understand why they can't just calm down. So I will ask this to all the adults in the room. When you've been at the height of distress and someone said, calm down to you, did it work? Oh, that's all I had to do was calm down. I hadn't thought of that. No, it's because think of your brain as a staircase, you know, and here at the bottom is your basement brain, main level, top floor is the penthouse suite. So this penthouse suite is your prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that is responsible for organizing, decision-making, complex thought, and thinking about the longer term. When kids are exposed to adverse events in childhood during that critical construction period of the brain, here's the thing, everybody has a penthouse suite. What differs, however, is for people who've had a lot of exposure to adverse childhood events, their construction uses day laborers who don't have a lot of great experience. Maybe the materials aren't that great. The construction process, some corners are cut. Versus people who have a lot of helpful experiences in early childhood that enrich their brain and keep that developmental pathway nice and clear. Good construction up here. That can be the differentiator, because as adults, we're all dialing into that prefrontal cortex, right? And we're all a sum of our parts and the many experiences that we've had. But now we've learned that even if during that critical window of development, that prefrontal cortex, right, the control tower for your brain, even if the construction of that was compromised, it's not the end. Change is always possible. And I used to tell clients when I would see them, expiration dates only belong on the side of a milk carton. We never give up hope that people can change, okay? And so with all we know about the brain now, that's really awesome. And we also know more about women's mental health. Unfortunately, psychiatry's relationship with women has not always gone super well. I will not bring up Freud tonight, because this is a women's empowerment talk. But a lot of our understanding of mental health up until a few decades ago was not balanced in terms of looking at the experiences of the different genders, right? But we know way more now than we ever have before. And for those of you who are in leadership positions in organizations, you're now starting to hear that there's an emphasis on psychologically safe work environments, right? Occupational health and safety legislation is now ensuring that employers are taking the steps that they need to keep their employees physically and emotionally safe. So there's never been a better time than right now for us to take action on our mental health. And the other thing is, mental health support now is democratized. I know Twitter and TikTok. I'm not cool, and I'm not on TikTok. I know those things can sometimes be overwhelming, and you do have to sift through that sort of information to get to the nuggets. But we also have more self-directed ways for you to manage your mental wellness that don't require you to come see somebody like me, although I think I'm pretty nice. There's different ways for people to access mental health support and coaching, and it could be a workbook, it could be guided meditations. There's so many good things you can access online. So getting help can now happen at a much faster pace. We'll just go to the next slide, please and thanks. So in terms of where change happens and where it could happen for you, think of like an upside down pyramid, and at that top of the pyramid, the biggest, widest part, that's at the societal level. And to be fair, folks, that's probably not something we can influence right here, right now, tonight. But this is about health policy, right? This is about having a health system that doesn't just emphasize managing illness, but also proactively encourages wellness. And having been the manager of an inpatient psychiatric unit, we were about crisis. You know, and so it's important for there to be a balance of health and wellness is something that doesn't take, you know, we shouldn't just be accessing health in the absence of those things, you know. Healthcare in the absence of those things. So at that biggest level, society, there's policies and restructuring healthcare so that we can have systems that promote good mental wellness. If you go down as the pyramid gets skinnier, that's more like the community level, and part of that is events like what are happening tonight and building out those networks of, we call them informal supports. You know, people are more likely to tell a friend, neighbor, or a coworker that they're struggling well before they'll go see a professional. I know sometimes we think it's the opposite. It's really not. And to be fair, people shouldn't have to be on a wait list to see a professional to get help and support. There's a lot that can happen at the community level, which is why events like this are so crucial, right? And then at the tip, the smallest point, there's stuff that the individual can do. And if you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide, please, we'll talk about that. So this is the Calgary Bull Building downtown. Pretty impressive photo, hey? So I just want to tell you another story to illustrate a concept. So just like tree branches rustling in the breeze, skyscrapers do sway in the wind. Their steel construction allows for normal swaying without endangering the building's structural integrity nor the occupants inside. While some might find it unsettling to notice a tall building swaying in the wind, this natural movement is no cause for concern and actually means the skyscraper is working as designed. Because skyscrapers are so tall, their architects must be very precise in keeping the buildings upright. Skyscrapers are specifically designed to withstand extreme weather and geological events, such as high winds or earthquakes. Allowing for movement helps these tall buildings sway and alleviate wind pressure, minimizing any fall risk. In the same way, engineers build sway into a building so it stays standing. So too must each of us engineer resilience so we stay standing. And the thing about resilience is it may not keep you perfectly upright, but it keeps you standing. And when we talk about this, I encourage people to find your sway. And in doing so, this also means telling perfectionism to take a hike. Because notice, I said the sway keeps you upright. It does not keep you perfect. And I do think that pathological perfectionism is an affliction that many women have struggled with at some point in their life. Now, and I'm so sorry, I am going to sound like a family therapist again. I would say with perfectionism, too much and you're like a jitterbug, too little and you're like a slug on a rug. You do need just enough to motivate you to take action that is possible. So it's sort of like when I teach at the university, I don't want students staying up until 6 o'clock in the morning every night leading up to the exam. That's going to make themselves sick. And it's not going to change their performance and might actually disadvantage them because they're going to be so tired and exhausted. But do I want them to study so they do well? Yes. And do I want them to have good study habits and routines that allow them to succeed? Yes. And that's an example of just enough. Like, to be fair, that's perfectionism, but it's not pathological perfectionism. And I can only speak for myself as an N of one. But there have been times in my life where I didn't know the difference between having just enough to keep me standing upright versus obsessively being really hard on myself. And the irony is, the harder you try to stay perfectly upright, the more likely your tower is to collapse. Embracing imperfection, recognizing that setbacks are a part of life, but having the confidence that you can withstand them is mission critical to your building, staying, standing. So how do we build this resilience? Part of it is mindset. Have a can-do attitude, maintain a hopeful outlook, establish and maintain those good relationships, and engage in authentic opportunities for self-discovery. Now I want to be clear, I'm not saying turn that frown upside down. Working in the industry that I do, I've worked with folks who have lived 100 lives, and I wish that they hadn't had the painful experiences that they had. What I'm talking about, though, is the sense of, yes, things are difficult, but I will survive, right? And part of how we develop that ability is through communication and problem-solving skills, learning how to recognize and manage strong emotions, and also putting ourselves in proximity of external resources to help us reach the goals that we want to meet. And having caring and supportive relationships both inside your household and outside your household will help you do that. The second secret ingredient that I wanted to share with you is about hope. Now, I recognize that hope is kind of a vague concept, but you won't be surprised to hear me say, we've researched hope. And hope actually is good for your psychological wellness. And in fact, when I used to lead groups, and every so often I'll go sit in and lead groups with men who've been mandated for domestic violence treatment. And I know I might not be the therapist that you would expect to see. Believe it or not, it works. It works. But we've studied what are the factors that make people likely to complete group therapy. So, you want to guess what one of them is? Hope. If people do not have an optimistic view that things can be better than they are today, they're not coming back. And I think that also applies to life outside of the therapy room as well. If fundamentally you don't believe that things can be different or better tomorrow than they are today, it is going to be tough to maintain a sense of motivation, or make those investments to keep yourself strong. And we also know that when people report having higher levels of hope, it better enables them to mediate stressful events. So that's something to keep in mind. So we'll just go to the next slide, please. Let's see if I can turn this page. I'm pretty low tech, folks. So I thought this quote might be kind of cool for tonight, just given what we're talking about. I've learned that making a living is not the same thing as making a life. And I know Maya Angelou has to be one of the most regularly quoted women, but with good reason. Remember how we talked about those conditions for mental wellness? A sense of purpose. Believing that you can make choices. How do you move from just living to making a life? And so I have a bit of a homework assignment for you tonight. If you're thinking, geez, this is a drag, now you know how all those students at Mount Royal, the U of C in Bow Valley feel. I'm going to ask you this question. Thinking about those domains of wellness that I mentioned earlier, my homework assignment for each of you is I don't want you to think about the biggest change you could make. I actually want you to think about the smallest. What's the smallest change you could make in each of those domains? And if you made that change, who is the first person in your life who's going to notice? And there's one catch. I know it's going to be 8 or 9 o'clock by the time you're out of here tonight, but I want you to find one that you can do today. So to repeat, those domains were physical. Is there anything you need to do to keep all of this in tip-top shape? Intellectual. Is your brain thinking about the things you want it to think about? Are you stimulated? Is your sense of curiosity nurtured? If you're a smarty pants, do you get to be a smarty pants in your life? Or are you making yourself smaller? Emotional. Are you giving yourself permission to notice your feelings? Do you know what your feelings are? How do you relate to your emotions? Social. We've talked about that. Who are the people in your life? Is there anybody you need or want to reconnect with? Who might be surprised to hear your voice on the other end of a phone call? Who is going to enrich your fabric and build you up? And conversely, I was in the garden today trimming the hedge, clipping off branches that were interfering with growth. Are there any branches that need to be clipped? Vocational. Are your talents and abilities being used in the ways that you want? Financial. How you doing with your finances? And if you are fortunate to have lots of resources, are you spending those resources and making the investments that you want to have maximum impact in the ways that matter to you the most? And finally, environmental. Where are you? And is that where you want to be? Now, going back to some of those ones that focus on psychological wellness, do you have the ability to make choices in your life? And is there a choice you've been delaying? And I don't know why, you do. But is there something getting in the way of you making decisions that you need to make? And that sense of purpose. What keeps you going? And is there something that you want to do in your life that you've been putting off, and maybe you need to just do it? And if you can't do all of it, what's one small step or gesture that you can take? Now, I get that I'm a therapist, and so I should probably also tell you the value of counseling and consulting with a physician for medication, and that's what I'm doing right now. I think those can be helpful tools to compel and motivate action. But I can tell you, when we've researched what has the most influence on positive outcomes for folks who come to see people like me, the bucket is called extra therapeutic factors, meaning stuff that's happening outside of the room when I'm not around. So that's your homework challenge, is to identify what's one small, I'm even going to say the tiniest change you could make in each of those domains. And I really want to encourage you to do at least one tonight. Maybe you can do it on the intermission. I don't know. But I'm going to give you that nudge. And so we'll go to the last slide. You know, I said my ever-growing shoe collection. I'll be honest, it's a sneaker collection. For work, I have a bunch of brown shoes and black shoes with varying heel. They're not that exciting, but my favorite sneaker is, you know how old I am now, 43, so I'm a kid who grew up watching Michael Jordan, so of course Jordans are my favorite sneaker. And so of course this is one of my favorite quotes. The only way to do it is to do it. Just do it. Just do it. So thank you so much for indulging me. It was a pleasure sharing this space with all of you this evening. Thank you very much. Shall I trade places with you? Okay.
Thank you, Lana. Here, use mine. Thank you, Lana. Can we put our hands together for Lana? Thank you. I was just scribbling away as you were speaking. I have so many questions. So I'm looking forward to the chat we have later so I can bombard you with my questions. So it's time to listen to Jennifer. So can we play her introduction video and then we can make some room for her?
Jennifer Keable is a dedicated fulfillment strategist and coach who specializes in empowering ambitious, exhausted women and business teams to transform insecurities into personal and professional effectiveness, reclaim control of their calendar and life, and implement strategic stress management for embodied peace of mind and elevated efficacy. With a strong academic foundation in psychology and unprecedented client transformations, Jennifer guides ambitious women and teams who are exhausted by traditional definitions of success and helps them break free from the chains of self-sacrifice, reclaim their happiness and well-being while simultaneously enhancing their professional effectiveness and success. Having personally experienced and successfully navigated through crippling imposter syndrome, self-neglect, and 3 burnouts, with her first burnout at 21 years of age, Jennifer brings a unique understanding and empathy to her coaching practice. As an acclaimed coach, she has garnered a reputation for delivering transformational results to her clients, enabling them to improve their health, reclaim their happiness, achieve a balanced life and a calm demeanor that is resilient beyond their years. Notably, her clients have also achieved remarkable career advancements, including promotions and substantial pay increases. In addition to her coaching expertise, Jennifer is a highly sought-after speaker, frequent podcast guest, and top-notch workshop facilitator. Her insights and perspectives have captivated audiences and transformed lives and corporate teams alike. Jennifer's mission is to improve women's personal and professional effectiveness so that they can live a life of undeniable impact without sacrificing their time, family commitments, and health to achieve it. Outside of her business, Jennifer is passionate about living a life of balance and joy. Jennifer creates this life by following a rock-solid routine of exercise, journaling, and meditating that sets her day up for success. Further, she schedules bi-weekly off-the-path city adventures through Fish Creek with an incredible friend and schedules one full-day hike per month with her bestie. If that's not creating a life of balance, joy, and intentionality, I don't know what is.
Jennifer, please, let's welcome you up to the podium for your session. Let's put our hands together for Jennifer.
Wow, what an introduction. Do you ever feel like it's incredibly hard to grasp the fact that people are speaking so highly of you? Seriously, what an honor it is to be here today. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here. Not for me, but for you. Because I know how darn hard it is to show up for ourselves when there's a million other things we could do and a million other people we could be doing things for. So seriously, thank you. I also want to thank Dr. Chika and the team for believing in me enough to take you on this transformation and share with you some incredible insight. Today, we are going to travel through time. This is the journey through my life, where the learning curve was incredibly hard. The emotions were incredibly raw, and the learning experience incredibly profound. Let's begin the ride. I was 21 years old, and I'd been carefully watching every move of my sister as she ran a painting franchise that we were both invited to run. You see, when we were invited, I was skeptical, and I took a large step back. My sister, though, she saw an opportunity, and she took that leap forward. Well, after watching her run a business for a year and realizing that you really can make incredible money doing this, I decided if she could do it, I could do it better. Sounds a little bit harsh, I know. And I don't mean it in a harsh way because I love her to the end of this world. But what I saw was her working hard. And what I knew is that I was willing to work a million times harder, because I had work ethic like none other. And so the journey began. The long learning curve, fast and furious. I had to learn everything there was, not only about painting, but on how to run a successful business. You see, because there was no way that I was going to run any other type of business if it wasn't successful. And that became my driving force moving forward. I became so fearful of failing that it dictated everything that I did. Because it would mean that if my business failed, wasn't that a reflection on me and who I was and my capabilities, my skills? If I couldn't be successful at this business, it meant that I was a failure. And everybody would know the truth. You see, I didn't actually realize that that's what was going on at a subconscious level at the time. All I knew was that failing was the scariest thought in the world. But now I understand why. Because I perceived anything less than great success as a threat to my belonging and a threat to my identity. After all, my dad taught me from a very young age that success is about the dollar figure that you bring in. It's about your job status, your title, your responsibility, your perceived importance by others. If I could achieve this definition of success, it meant I was successful. I was important, and therefore I was so damn worthy. Well, it was this underlying need to prove myself that led me to working 16-hour days, 6 days a week. I was bringing in the sales. My team was producing high quality and quantity of projects. I was ultimately proving my value. My goal of producing $75,000 worth of work in one summer quickly bumped up to $85,000 and then $100K. You see, the one goal that I would have previously have been so proud of achieving no longer mattered because I was striving for that next level of success. And it became this relentless pursuit of success that landed me in the hospital only weeks after my 21st birthday. My face was numb, my head was numb, and I was collapsing to the floor. I remember sitting in the hospital bed with my dad by my side. It was complete silence. And then amidst the beeping of the machines, he blurted out, "Well, maybe if you didn't have a piece of metal sticking through your head, your face wouldn't be numb right now." Apparently he was talking about my nose stud that he didn't agree with. I remember thinking, really? Really, Dad? This is what you have to say to me right now? I knew it didn't feel right. But it's only occurred to me in the last few years where it wasn't just my dad that got it wrong. We all got it wrong. You see, my dad was looking to blame it on some life choice I made that he didn't agree with. The doctors were looking for very obvious reasons to explain the symptoms that I was experiencing. But when they couldn't find it, they didn't look into my life circumstances. And I chose to be the victim. I chose to simply sit back and let everybody else come up with the answers and tell me what was wrong. It is so damn clear to me now that what was happening then was nothing short of being burnt out. You see, I had worked my mind and body to complete exhaustion, and this was my body's way of telling me it couldn't take anymore. Are you listening to the messages that your body is giving you? Despite my body sending a very loud message, as soon as I was able, I was back on my feet and I was striving for success. Well, fast forward, and after finishing my first year of my business and proving to myself that I was more than capable, I leaned in to my ability. I hired a production manager, and I began to have weekends, evenings off. I even traveled for 2 weeks during my busiest season. While my business grew, it thrived, and I traveled. See, I made more money and spent less time working this second year than I did the first year when I burnt myself to the ground. Now you might think, wow, what an incredible learning opportunity. You must have taken this with you through the rest of your career. I wish I could say that that was the truth. It's not, though. I didn't actually allow myself to reflect and see how this was a lifelong lesson that I could take with me from career to career. Instead, I saw it as a one-off. And so the goal of chasing external success colored with dollar figures, elevated responsibility, job status, and perceived importance by others continued on. This time, I was 32 years old. I was working as a project manager, running multi-million-dollar projects. I was happily married. I had 2 cute-as-button boys at home, mischievous as ever. I had everything I ever wanted to create. I was a success. Inside, though, I was exhausted. I was lonely. I lacked the confidence, even though anyone that you would speak to would never even know. And I missed my days where happiness was my go-to state. I was confused as to how I could have everything I ever wanted to create and be less happy than I ever used to be. The truth is, I was worn the heck out. I gave everything to my job, And whatever I had left over when I got home at the end of the day, I gave it to my boys. My poor husband, he got the leftovers. Me, though, I got nothing. My version of self-care at the time consisted of showering and doing my hair and makeup so that I could go to work and look like a success. You see, neglecting self-care can only last so long before it bites you in the butt. And let me tell you, it bit me damn hard. So I was at an aerial yoga class. And for you, those of you who don't know what aerial yoga is, I highly recommend it. It's amazing. But it's this beautiful piece of fabric that hangs in the shape of a U from the ceiling. And it was the end of class. I was laying in Shavasana. And I'm laying there flat on my back. And I had this fabric just beautifully engulfing my body and just holding me in all the right ways. And there's a gentle sway back and forth, back and forth. And for the first time in years, I had allowed myself to completely relax. I was at ease. And that's when it hit me. It hit me so hard. All of a sudden, the emotion came over me. It took over my body. The tears came pouring down my face. And then I quickly snapped back to reality, remembering I'm in a public setting filled with a room of strangers, and I just need to make it a few more moments before I can rush down to the safety of my own car. And that's exactly what I did. I made it to my car, I locked those doors, and I cried, and I screamed, and I banged that steering wheel. I pulled my hair in confusion. I sobbed like I had never sobbed before. I was completely broken, or so I thought. I don't know how I made it home safe that night, but I'm so thankful that I did. And when I was home, my husband was exposed to small bits of this simply because we live in the same four walls and there was no hiding it. But the part of me that didn't already know that I was good enough wasn't okay with sharing more of it with him. And the part of me that didn't know I was good enough didn't tell my best friend, didn't tell my mom, didn't tell my sister, and didn't tell the doctor. Because if I dared admitted it, I would lose everything I would create. I thought then it would mean that I was a failure, I wasn't good enough. It meant that I was weak and I was broken. And I was supposed to be successful. And so I wasn't willing to take the risk. And so I kept it all inside of me, just like everything else. Well, thank goodness I am incredibly strong. And thank goodness I have perseverance. And thank goodness I searched for a different way to find success. Because I knew that I was here to thrive and be the whole woman that I was designed to be. You see, the version of success that I had previously been chasing, it was no longer serving me. And the truth is, it never really was. But it was finally that I was serious, that I was ready to overcome the everyday stress, the overwhelm, the burnout, and actually find a definition of success that felt good in my body. And so I dug deep to get to the root cause lying behind my overwhelm and my lack of fulfillment. As Jon Kabat-Zinn, PhD and scientist, says, wherever you go, there you are. You see, chances are your problems have been following you around for years, if not your entire life. And until you acknowledge that your job is not actually the problem, that your family is not actually the problem, that society is not actually the problem, it's something rooted deep within inside of you. Until you acknowledge that, your problems are going to continue to follow you around, wreak havoc on you, your relationships, your well-being, and your happiness. Is achieving this definition of external success worth giving all of that up for? You see, us high achievers, we often possess a set of common characteristics that drive our success. And yet it is these same characteristics that also cause us to approach our careers in unsustainable ways, ultimately leading to exhaustion and burnout. We often feel the pressure to not only outperform ourselves, but outperform those around us. Meanwhile, we completely lose sight of our personal lives. Our relationships get neglected, our well-being, our health, our happiness, it goes by the wayside. I know all too well because I've been there. Who's with me? This deeply rooted characteristic, it stays with us high-achieving women from job to job, industry to industry, beyond holidays and sabbaticals, because no amount of time can simply beat this characteristic out of us. It's time that we understand our own contribution to overwhelm, exhaustion, and burnout, because that, my ambitious friend, is the fastest way to get to the root of the problem and address the concern once and for all. That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? So what does it look like when we contribute to our own exhaustion and burnout? It looks like being the people pleaser, saying yes, even though you want to say no. It means perfecting details beyond reasonable expectations by others. It means being willing to put everything else on the back burner that you say means so much to you, including those people that you love the most. Does the life that you are living, the actions that you are taking on a daily basis, do they actually align with your values? What if there was a way to find peace of mind, balance, and success? Well, I'm happy to say that there is. I have found this 5-step process that continues to be successful over and over. And I'm going to run you through it. Number 1, start by contemplating your definition of success. Does your definition of success allow you to truly thrive in both your personal and professional life? Does it actually feel good in your body? So often, our definition of success solely focuses on our career advancement, on what we want to accomplish in our professional lives. Meanwhile, it neglects our personal lives. A definition of success that allows you to thrive should incorporate your physical, your mental health, your relationships with yourself, with others. Number 2, get curious on how you are contributing to the overwhelm. Lean in to your habits, your thought processes, and begin to get curious about how we are contributing. And not in a harsh way. It's not meant to be mean to ourselves, but a curious way, a way that we can learn and grow. So you can ask yourself questions like, am I overperforming as a means of proving my value? Am I a perfectionist who is completing projects beyond reasonable expectations by others? Am I taking on more than I can chew simply because I'm afraid of saying no? Get curious about how you are contributing to your overwhelm. Number 3, acknowledge that change starts within. This is not an outside job. You have the power to change, friends. You don't have to wait and separate your external success from your internal success and fulfillment. You absolutely get to choose if you are going to create change and step into the power inside of you right now. Stepping into your power means listening to that voice, and then rather than quieting her down, it's sharing her. It's speaking up in meetings, amongst friends, amongst your partner. It's about applying for that job, that promotion that you maybe previously didn't think you were qualified for or good enough for. It means asking for that salary raise because you are worthy and you do deserve it. It means discovering and enjoying a life outside of your career. When was the last time that you did that? When you decide that you are going to step into your power, that is the fastest way to ending burnout and finding a definition of success that feels so good. Number 4, use a holistic approach. A holistic approach that will address your body and mind as the single vessel that it is. You see, our mind and body sends thousands and thousands of messages to each other every single day. And the sooner that you acknowledge how interconnected they are, the sooner you will experience both success and flow. When you treat your mind and body as a single holistic vessel, you awaken a new sense of energy and ease, because no longer is your body and mind fighting against each other, using up all of that extra energy and bringing down your mood. It's actually working together. It's collaborating. It's raising you up. It's creating space for new energy. When you use a holistic approach, you address your physical, your emotional, your familial, and your cognitive needs. And when each of these points are in check, that is when you finally thrive. Number 5, work with a mentor who will efficiently and effectively direct you through this journey. When you can begin to address the stories and beliefs that are creating the thoughts at a subconscious level, that are driving your actions and holding you back from stepping into your power, stealing your happiness, sure, you can try and do this work on your own. But let me tell you from a place of personal and miserable experience, it's like trying to dig a swimming pool with a spoon. And it takes about as long as that too. While hiring a successful, experienced mentor is like hiring an excavator to get the job done in record time. Which would you prefer to endure? This mentorship and guided inward reflection accelerates personal and professional growth in profound ways. And instead of taking years, can get done much faster. Having been stuck in our habits and patterns for so many years, deciding to change isn't enough. It takes deconstructing these beliefs and allowing ourselves space to formulate new ones, so that these new beliefs can create new habits, new actions that actually bring you closer to your new definition of success, instead of simply holding you where you are or pulling you back. When you have an outside mentor who can see the big picture, who can see through the excuses and the limitations that we set on ourselves, that is when we are able to achieve that personal and professional success that feels so damn good. If we can go to the next slide, please. Friends, when you redefine success in a form that allows you to thrive, when you acknowledge your own contribution to burnout, when you implement a holistic approach that addresses your body and mind as the single vessel that it is, and when you find a mentor, this is when you can begin to build a burnout-free life, reclaim control of your calendar, your happiness, and your relationships. You don't have to waste the next 10 years trying to figure this out on your own, battling between burnouts. You can decide to find the mentor that is right for you now, to expedite that journey for you. One of my clients, Shannon, I don't know if we're able to bring up slides, but if we are, if we can just move through a few of them to the first picture or portrait, please. Shannon came to me lacking confidence, miserable in her job, exhausted from the constant go, go, go life. And within less than 6 months of working together, Shannon left her soul-sucking job. She found a new job that actually aligned with her values and made her excited every single day to go to work. In less than 3 months in this new position, Shannon got a promotion, a salary increase beyond anything that she had ever achieved before. At home, she had experienced greater balance despite having an elevated level of responsibility at work than she had ever achieved before. Her relationship with herself, with her partner, was thriving more so than it ever had. Her friends and family noticed this monumental shift in her and asked her, "Shannon, what are you doing? How did this happen?" And she said, "Jennifer allowed me to see just how powerful I am. and helped me dig deep to move beyond the mindset that was preventing me from doing everything I'm capable of. I owe it all to her. Diane. Diane came to me after running a multi-six-figure business, burnt out and filled with negative self-talk. In only 10 weeks of working together, Diane's self-rated metrics increased 90%. 90% in 10 weeks. Her happiness went from a 65 to a 75%. Her joy went from 55 to 75%. Her peace of mind went up 15% from 70 to 85. And most astounding of all, her positive self-talk went from 30% to 85%. Could you imagine what you would be capable of? Could you imagine the opportunities that would exist? Could you imagine just how darn good you would feel if your positive self-talk was at 85%? Thing is, friends, the universe is abundant, and the same remarkable opportunities that have graced others eagerly await you. The women that I work with save years of dreadful learning tax. They stop playing small, and they step into their most powerful and successful form. If you want an excavator to help clear the path, I'm here for you. Come find me after this. I'm happy to discuss. I'm happy to set up a call. We can talk about things in privacy. But I want you to know that you deserve to live an amazing life. You are incredible. Go claim her. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer. Can we just put our hands together again for Jennifer? Excellent session. Thank you. Just like you said, it was going to be packed. So thank you for squeezing all that into the few minutes you had. So we'll take a short break now, just move around the room, make a new friend, swap information, get some refreshments at the back over there, and then we'll convene in the next 10 minutes. Over that time, can you find anyone who has our WTAL t-shirt on and just hand them your questions? And so we can have that ready for our discussion session. Thank you. See you in a few minutes.
Blessed to be here. And I also just wanted to say back to the cause, give back to society, and just kind of share my experience with you. So I'm hoping that by the end of my session, end of my talk, if you go home with one or two nuggets or tidbits, I think my work here has been done. So just a little bit about me. What I'm going to be talking to you today about is I'll be talking about career growth. If you're feeling stuck in your career, how to traject your career to the next level, how to grow your career. And I'll be giving you tips and tricks that has worked for me based on my experience, right? So the lens that I'm going to be delivering this speaking engagement is what I've gone through. So just a little bit about me. I'm going to take you back because I've been in this country for 27 years, but I've had about 23 years in corporate Canada, working and growing my career. So I'll take you back to my story. So this would be like storytelling, and I'll be giving you tips and tricks as to how I was able to grow my career. So right now, what do I currently do? I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Olympia Trust Company. It's a financial services, non-deposit taking financial institution. And then, so it's a C-suite position and an executive position. I also own my own business, Ufadike Professional Corporation, UPC, where we provide anything from personal to corporate taxes, audit, forensic accounting, investigations, and consulting. And then my third stream is I do sit on boards. So just like I was introduced, I sit on 4 boards, not-for-profit and Crown Corporation, and I chair their audit, finance, and risk board. Trust here. The Lana share for the opportunity to speak to you very beautiful people today, and just the opportunity to give back to the cause, give back to society, and just kind of share my experience with you. So I'm hoping that by the end of my session, the end of my talk, if you go home with 1 or 2 nuggets or tidbits, I think my work here has been done. So just a little bit about me. What I'm going to be talking to you today about is I'll be talking about career growth. If you're feeling stuck in your career, how to traject your career to the next level, how to grow your career. And I'll be giving you tips and tricks that has worked for me based on my experience, right? So the lens that I'm going to be delivering this speaking engagement is what I've gone through. So just a little bit about me. I'm going to take you back because I've been in this country for 27 years, but I've had about 23 years in corporate Canada, you know, working and growing my career. So I'll take you back to my story. So this will be like storytelling, and I'll be giving you tips and tricks as to how I was able to grow my career. So right now, what do I currently do? I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Olympia Trust Company. It's a financial services, non-deposit taking financial institution. And then, so it's a C-suite position and an executive position. I also own my own business, Ufadike Professional Corporation, UPC, where we provide anything from personal to corporate taxes, audit, forensic accounting, investigations, and consulting. And then my third stream is I do sit on boards. So just like I was introduced, I sit on 4 boards, not-for-profit and Crown Corporation, and I chair their audit, finance, and risk committee. I wanted to make sure that I say that because every single stream or every single one of those lines of business, I call it for myself, has, you know, given me some kind of experience and helped me traject my career to the next level. And I'll explain why and how. So let me take you back on a journey. I immigrated, so I'm from Nigeria. I immigrated when I was 16 to Vancouver with my family. When I came, I think at that time I was too young to get into university, and I got into college. So while I was in college, I was working at a clothing store. At that time, there was an RBC branch right beside the store I was working, and I would see people just dress up and go into the branch and they work. And I always had this yearning for corporate Canada. I just wanted to do that. And I said to my manager at that time, I really want to be a bank teller. And she looked at me and said, why would you want to do that? That's one of the lowest paying profession at that time. Bank tellers were getting paid $7.70. If you worked for tellers at that time in Vancouver, it was one of the highest paid position for students, at $13. And then clothing was about maybe $11, $12. So she looked at me and was like, why would you want to leave what you have now and do that? So this is lesson number 1, because that singular decision that I made was the genesis of my career in banking, right? But I didn't listen to her. I did up my resume. At that time, they didn't have any online portal for you to submit. I walked downtown to the office, submitted my resume, and then I got called, went to the interview, and got offered the job as a bank teller. That was the highlight of my time at that time. But my happiness was short-lived. I was working as a bank teller, really enjoyed it, but I got robbed twice at gunpoint. So I was the token teller that the bank robber came. So that experience, not just once, but twice. So that experience was quite traumatic. And because of that, I said to myself, I would never do frontline again. So around the same time, I graduated from college and I was looking for a university. I kind of hated Vancouver. It wasn't really cool at that time. But I had heard about this city called Toronto that was hustling and bustling with a lot of people. So I said to myself, I applied to the University of Toronto, and I got in. And I went to my parents and I said, I was 19 at that time. I told them I want to move to Toronto. And they said, but you don't have a job. How are you going to support yourself? So then I started looking for a job. But I knew that I didn't want to do frontline. I went through the roster and I found this position called a fraud analyst. Had no experience, didn't even know what that meant, but I applied for it. So lesson number 2. There's statistics out there that show that women, as women, we don't apply for things until we feel that we're 100% qualified. But men, they are more confident, even if they're 20, 30, 40% qualified or meet the requirements, they will go ahead and apply for it. So my advice for you today is if you see something that you think you are interested in, that is part of your career path, whether you have the direct experience or not, as long as you have transferable skill set, go ahead and do it, because what's the worst that could happen? They tell you no, and then you move on, right? But back to the story. So I applied to the role as a fraud analyst, didn't think I was gonna get it, got an interview, and I guess myself and the hiring manager, we just hit it off. She liked me, I liked her, I got hired. But like I said, that was the genesis of my career, really in banking and in fraud and forensics. So I started working at RBC, at the National Fraud Detection Group, which was very interesting, investigating different types of debit and credit card fraud. So at the time, there was a lot of fraud with credit card because the magnetic strip at that time, we didn't have the technology, the chip technology that we have today that is, really good. At that time, the point of compromise was just everywhere, right? So lots of investigation. So I really loved it. So did that for 2 years, and then I got promoted to become the assistant manager, investigating different types of internal Royal Bank defalcation, so when internal staff steal, right? And then 9/11 happened. They introduced this thing called the Bill C-25, which is the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, and they tapped me to lead that department. Didn't know anything about it, but transferable skills, right? That's what I keep saying. Transferable skills, investigation, you're following the money, whether it's for fraud or for money laundering purposes, you're doing that. So I was in the bank for a total of 6 years. And I looked at my resume and I said, this is good, but I think I need more. So lesson number 3, get uncomfortable with being comfortable. I know that a lot of times you're in your role, you can even do it while you're sleeping. It's not challenging anymore, but it's just easy because you're getting easy money. But that is a slippery slope, and it's a very challenging place to be. It's very risky because you're there, you're comfortable, you're not being challenged, but the money is good, you're not growing, but hey, what it is. And if you keep doing that, you find yourself being stuck because you'll not be motivated to do more, right? You will never grow your career or trajectory to the next level if you're very comfortable. Once you're very comfortable and you stop learning, kick yourself in the behind, it's time to move on, right? So, like I said, I was at the bank for 6 years, and around that time, there was this new field called forensics, forensic accounting. Nobody knew what it was. I was curious, and I thought to myself, I think I'm going to pursue this. And at that time, the only firms that were offering this type of positions were consulting companies, right? And of course, again, I applied and I got in. But I left a leadership managerial role to take an analyst role. So sometimes, so this is lesson number 4, it's okay to go back, reset, to go forward, right? And I always say career growth is not always vertical. It could be horizontal, where you're stepping aside and you're garnering and gaining all the breadth of experience. And that experience is transferable to help traject you to the next level. So I took a lower role as a fraud analyst for a consulting company. Really loved it, and that was one of the best experience I could have gotten because it wasn't myopic, it wasn't narrow. I could do investigations for different types of company across a spectrum, right? So when I'm speaking to a client, I can draw my experience from this company, completely different. So that was great, meeting different clients, and I was growing in my breadth of experience. And not only that, in the consulting firms, there's different arms, right? So not only can you talk about doing forensics, you could go shadow tax, you could do other types of consulting, mergers and acquisitions, so you're learning, right? So that was good. So I did that for 2 years, but I had to leave because of course, with consulting world, work, family, life balance. I was getting married at that time. I wanted to start a family. I used to go to work at like 6 in the morning, but wouldn't leave till like 1 a.m., so it was taking a toll. So I said to myself, okay, I need something more stable. And then I started working for OSFI, which is a regulatory body that supervises financial institutions and life insurance company. Again, still growing my career. And then myself and my husband decided to move to Alberta, Calgary, because we wanted to own and operate our own accounting practice. So that's how we started off with Ufodiki Professional Corporation. So we did that full-time for a while, and then we decided to go back in industry, because I always say you can never be in Alberta and not work for oil and gas, right? So decided to go back into industry, working for Enbridge, leading their forensics, compliance team, and then fast forward to today. So let me not take you through my career in a nutshell. Fast forward to today, I'm now the Chief Compliance Officer for Olympia Trust Company, and I oversee regulatory compliance, policy management, privacy for the entire organization. So that's my work history in a nutshell. So in all, I had worked for 6 companies, and in these 6 companies, I was able to grow, learn, garner experience, right? But the top 5 tips that I would leave with you today on how to grow your career. The first one is, leaning in. I think that as women, we've been shown to really underestimate our abilities. We tend to shy away from all those assertive or leadership roles that propel us to shine, right? We'd rather be followers than leaders. So what I'm here to tell you today is that, at work, you may be asked, there may be a new project that is going on that you have no knowledge about, like nothing, you know nothing about that project. I want you to put up your hand to lead it. It will be very scary, but leading it will give you a chance to showcase your abilities, to learn about leadership skills, to learn new skills that you haven't learned before. Then you're being a leader and people are seeing you in that light that they haven't seen you before. So that tomorrow when there's something else, they remember you and they can call you to say, hey, you led that project, it was very successful, let's tap her to do that again. And on your resume, you've garnered leadership skills even though you're not in a managerial position. So this is what I mean by transferable skills, and you're able to speak confidently about those type of skills, right? So leaning in is one, so just, showing and in opportunities that showcase leadership skills and opportunities for you to shine. The other one is learning up, right? Knowledge is power. We all know that, and we've heard that time and time again. And it's by continuously learning that you amplify your power. So for me, I always say, I have a lot of letters after my name, and it's not by accident. For every role that I've had to garner the requisite education to help burnish my skill set. So when I walk into the room or somebody's reading my bio, they think, wow, she knows what she's talking about. Whether I do, whether I don't, doesn't matter, but you think so, right? So it's always perception that counts, and that's very important, right? Never underestimate your ability to continue learning, because when you stop learning, as the saying it goes, you die, really, right? So knowledge is power. So always focus on your professional development, and it doesn't matter what it is, so just keep learning. The next one is really have a plan. Know where you want to be, I would say in 5 years from now. Even if you don't know, just have a plan. Make a plan of things that make you happy. I always say, that make you happy. I remember when I first came to this country, I used to go on, I think at that time it was Wakapolis and I would just search up, like top paying jobs. And I would see like CEOs, CFOs, CCOs. And I would say to myself, at that time I was 16, that's what I want to do. How will I get there? I don't know, but I just used to see that and I thought, I know I want to make money. I know I want to be an executive one day and just have a plan, right? It could be a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, but you just need to have a plan of where you want to be, doing things that make you happy. And like I talked about, career growth is not always vertical, right? It could be horizontal, where you are, stepping aside to garner experience that will grow your breadth and depth of experience that are transferable to helping you traject yourself to the next level. I also talked about getting uncomfortable with being comfortable. Don't ever forget that. And then my last tip is be very self-aware and build your own personal brand. I think this is the one time where I would tell you that you should worry about what people say about you in corporate environment. Because I've been on executive tables where you have a leader speak negatively about one of their staff. I don't know the staff, but guess what? That's my impression. It's now left an impression on me about that individual, right? So I always say in the workplace, you want to have a work buddy or a coach or a mentor or somebody who can tell you objectively what they think about you, how you did in your presentation, or how you're doing at work, period. Somebody that you trust, right? Like I said, this is the one time I'll probably tell you you should worry about, what other people have to say about you, because it's about your own personal brand. It's always very important to know your blind spots and work on them every day, right? Because everybody else can likely see your blind spots except you, right? You really don't know what you're not good at, but you think you're good at that. So that's why it's always good to have like a corporate mentor to say, hey, I think I did well in that presentation, but how did I really do? Did I really hit the nail on the head, or was I just off the mark, right? So that's really my tips for you for career advancement and how to grow your career. But at the end of the day, be yourself. Don't settle for less. Always keep growing. Always keep yearning and always keep wanting more. Don't settle. Don't settle, don't settle, and get uncomfortable with being comfortable. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, the empty one's mine and the full one.
Check, check.
Check, check.
Check, check.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We're back. So first of all, once again, thank you, Lana. Thank you, Jennifer. What an excellent, time you've had to share all those nuggets with us. Just for anyone watching now and those of you in the audience, we often kind of keep their lectures and still go over them during the week and over the next couple of weeks on our social media platforms. So please go ahead and watch it again. We are streaming live on YouTube right this minute, and we'll have those videos stored and documented. So in the future, you can always go back and and watch. So so this is our quick discussion session. So I'm going to start with you, Lana. I have maybe 100 questions for you.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, some of the questions I have are not quite tied to what you say now, but things that kind of were spurred in terms of my interest as you spoke. So my first question would be, what are the key things that affect our mental health on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think on a daily basis, first of all, when we're noticing when somebody's mental health is askew or off balance, it's typically because their behavior and their presentation doesn't quite meet the expectations or standards, if you will, that would apply to them normally. So, factors that would influence mental health are certainly somebody's immediate surroundings. So having adequate access to those basic necessities, and then stressors, be they internal or external. And I say internal because sometimes our own minds can be a source of stress. And so, I think external stressors that might impact somebody's mental wellness, it's all age dependent and sort of fits that age and stage of life. But what's going on at school? What's going on at work? What's going on within family? What's going on within your immediate surroundings? Having a safe place to sleep each night makes a huge difference, Sometimes I certainly don't want to diminish the importance of my profession, but food security, housing security, and healthy relationships are probably the unnamed therapists that provide people with the guidance and nourishment that they need on a daily basis.
Yeah. So I think a good follow-up question would be that, is mental health something that everyone should be mindful of? Like, are there ages or stages in life where people are exempt from these issues?
Yeah, I think at all stages it's something to consider. Certainly developing the penthouse suite. The rapid period of time where that's developed is for kids ages 0 to 5. And so during that time period, the way that kids develop that prefrontal cortex is through littles talk to their bigs. And so we call that the serve and return cycle of kids start talking and communicating, and and adults go, goo goo gaga, like having those warm, attuned moments with kids is what helps them develop that penthouse suite, and that then is something that they carry with them for life that helps them manage strong emotions, engage in problem solving, prioritize, and have more complex thoughts and, make good decisions. With that being said, it's not like, once your 6th birthday happens that, you're set for life. There's development throughout the lifespan. And I would say for those who are watching today who have teenagers, people forget that that's also a period of rapid development as well. The difference is it's also accompanied by a need for independence. And so there's still a need for that connection and guidance from a supportive adult. But kind of a push-pull. I need you, leave me alone. And then I would say from a women's mental health perspective, I think that there are still developmental stages we go through as adults, whether it be having children, getting married, starting to adopt those adult responsibilities. And as you go through that development, certainly there are changes that can happen to you mentally and emotionally. I did want to give a bit of a shout out because I think there can still be a bit of stigma around this, but some women do struggle after pregnancy with postpartum depression. And, you know, that can be a very, very challenging time for some as they not only adapt to all the changes their body's going through in their chemistry, but just the multiple demands now and the change in identity and role. So adulthood is still a period of adjustment and adaptation. And so, yeah, I think throughout the lifespan, it's something that you can invest in. And I think positive change and development is certainly possible at any age and stage.
Awesome. Thanks, Lana. Jennifer.
Your turn.
Yeah.
Oh no.
So yeah, it was fantastic. You know, I think one of the things that interests me most about the discussions around work-life balance is some of the research I've read. I call it a myth. People say that it's a myth, that it's unachievable. And if you read some of the statistics around work-life balance, you know, just early this year, I think I read a journal from American Psychological Association that was saying on January 1st, 2023, that burnout for the working class is at an all-time high. You know, so I don't know if you want to speak to that, because, you know, if we hear this term very often used, people are talking about work-life balance, I'm finding balance. People are, much like yourself, who are kind of proponents, you know, of this idea, but we're still seeing people suffering for the lack of it. You know, so is there, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's something that comes up all the time. It's like, yeah, that sounds brilliant, it sounds amazing, but is it actually achievable? And it goes down to that very first point I said. It's based off of your definition of success. So if you're constantly striving for that definition of success that is based off of maybe society or somebody else, or that it only considers external factors, such as your income, your job status, your responsibility, your external achievements, and doesn't actually include anything about your personal life, your well-being, then no, it's not going to be possible to find that balance, because it's not even included in your plan. So how would you achieve it? That's why it's like, it might sound like something so simple that you need to redefine success, but it really is important, because if your definition of success is only dollar figures, is only job status, you're going to be successful in that, but you're not going to be successful in finding balance. And balance can mean different things for different people, right? Balance might mean for some people that they're simply having maybe one evening off a week, one day off on the weekend. That might be their definition, and they're truly thriving and they're happy. But for other people, they need a lot more downtime. So it's not a myth. Honestly, like I've told you guys, I burnt out 3 times. My first time at 21 years of age, because I only was using that definition that was based on external factors. We have to include the internal factors in our well-being, and if we're serious about it, and our actions actually line up with that definition, it is achievable. But it means also setting very clear boundaries. So for example, for myself, I'm an entrepreneur. And building my business, when you're an entrepreneur, especially at the beginning, you want to be able to put in that time so you get to that stage in your business where you want to be. It can be really easy to go back to where I was, working 16-hour days, 6 days a week. But part of my definition of success is balance. because I not only want to feel good, but I want to be there for my family. So I created a very clear rule. I will not work past 3:30, Monday to Friday, because I want to be there and go pick up my boys from the bus stop. And at first, I was working till 4:35, but the amount of stress it created when my little boys, who were so excited to see me, because they hadn't been with me all day, and I kept being like, no, I gotta work. No, I'll listen to you shortly. No. And then you start getting irritated because they're constantly interrupting, but they just want to show you love, right? They miss you. So when I took that hour out and was like, no, I'm gonna finish my day by 3:30, and I'm gonna be there for them so that I can solely focus on them. I didn't get any less done during my week because I was more focused because I knew that I gotta have that time off. But if I just said arbitrarily, well, I want balance, and I didn't clearly define what balance was, chances are I wouldn't achieve it, right? It's like saying, oh, well, I want to go to this new location, I want to come here tonight, but I'm not actually going to put the address in the GPS. You don't have the steps to get there, you're not going to, or it's going to take you a heck of a long time. Yeah.
I mean, Jennifer, fantastic answer, but like what I'm hearing from you saying is that one key component in balance is the number of things you're juggling, right? And I mean, that just ties in very well to my next question. So in this context of our community, where this is for women, mostly, primarily is for women, and we see that many times responsibility of raising kids are the women's work, the responsibility of taking care of the home, running the home is the women's work, and society still expects us to start businesses, to succeed in career, to rise to executive levels, to be on boards, to be all these different things. So in this context of the multiplicity of responsibilities, how can a person still find work-life balance, right? Because, I mean, if you think of all the things expected, how many hours in a day do you need? Like, oh, you know, so I'm really talking in the context of something that is very practical, because we're speaking to women here who want to literally conquer the world, right? Yeah, so are you saying that one way to be assured of work-life balance is to be mindful of what you take on? Are you saying we have to defer things to later? Like, if you cast your mind back to my introduction when I was kind of starting off this seminar today, I was speaking about people who have encountered, who have said to me, hey, Dr. Chika, you know what? I want to do all these things, but I'm finding that I have to forego one thing for the other. You know, so are we telling them that there's really only that way to achieve balance, is by really sacrificing something till later?
Well,
I mean, Lana, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well when she's done, yeah.
you know, the funny thing is because you say that and you see it, or the way that you're defining it is as sacrificing something, like as in you're not achieving it. So you're sacrificing maybe not achieving that career position, or, you know, that maybe being on that board or whatever it is. But what are you sacrificing by continuing to do it all? Are you healthy? Are you happy? Is your relationship with your partner actually thriving? How about with your kids? Are you building that foundation where they know that you're going to be there no matter what? Right? So what are we sacrificing? There's always going to be sacrifices. Always. It's about what are you willing to sacrifice? Right? And so, yes, it's all, I also believe that part of it is knowing our own value. Oftentimes as women, we accept the idea or take on the idea that we have to do it all, right? We're trying to keep up with society. Well, let me tell you, if we try and keep up with society, you're gonna be burnt out. You're not gonna be happy. And there was a study done. There was this nurse who worked with the dying, right? And she was with them in the last weeks of her life. And so she did a study to see what are the main regrets of the people who are dying. And one of the number one regrets, okay, actually two I'm gonna list, but one of the number one regrets was living a life for everybody else and not for themselves, right? So that goes to exactly like, well, society expects this, society expects that. Yeah, well, you know what, good for society, because society doesn't have to feel what you're feeling inside of you, and it's not gonna have the regrets when you're on your deathbed, right? And then the other second one was working too much. I wish I didn't work so much and I spent more time with the people that I love and doing the things that mean the most to me. So we need to choose. Are we going to follow society's idea of success, of what we should be doing? Or are we actually going to build a life for us that we get to look back on and we're proud of? I say it with a lot of passion because I really am passionate about it. But
it sounds like you are. Lana, do you have any thoughts?
The only thing I would offer is just the notion of mindfulness. Whatever you're doing, do it fully. And I think sometimes, maybe we're at home and we're talking to our loved ones, but our attention is divided. And so I would say whatever it is you're doing, do it with your full awareness and intention. And I know this might sound contrary, we talk about multitasking. I would invite everybody to experiment with single tasking. And though that might feel very difficult because you're only doing one thing at a time, when you are fully riveted to the now of what you're doing, chances are the experience will be richer and it'll minimize the likelihood that you have to go back and do something twice. And so if you're open to getting some feedback tonight, folks, you may want to ask a trusted loved one, can you tell when I'm really listening to you versus going, and I'm not really in it? Single tasking might seem like it will take you longer, but I would actually say it just means that you will get things done richly, deeply, and properly, just one at a time.
Awesome. Thanks, Lana. One of the things you mentioned as you delivered your lecture, you were speaking about how many times women want women who look like them to be the ones who are kind of the source of treatment or conversation, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and then, so that just very quickly tied into something else I think I have come across where, the study was revealing that many times taking care of women with mental health issues or just taking care of their mental health state, is something that is different from the way men are taken care of. So is there a reason why there are two different kind of modes of treatment, or those conversations are vastly different?
Yeah, I think so. Just as a point of trivia, when we talk about mental health and gender, up until the ages of 0 to 12, it tends to be little boys that are actually seen in the mental health system. And they tend to present for treatment with externalizing disorders. Perhaps people have heard of, ADHD, for example. And then once we hit about age 13, it tends to be women who start to show up for mental health care with internalizing disorders. Externalizing disorders is when your big feelings go outwards. Internalizing is when they go in. And we tend to see women showing up more often with like anxiety, eating disorders, depression, etc. And so I think part of why women and men are dealt with differently in the system is, I think in your introductory remarks, you talked about how there are assumptions of how women ought to show up. And so I think that those assumptions have persisted and have framed how mental health practitioners view women when they come in for treatment. And I think the other part is that due to socialization, and I apologize if it seems like I'm speaking in broad strokes, but we know that there are differences in the way boys and girls are raised, which is why women tend to be a little harder on themselves, and they tend to base their value and their assessment of their value on feedback they get from others, which opens up not insurmountable issues, but it does open up some issues. And so all that to say, Dr. Chika, when we look at what women need as a part of their healing, it does kind of need to reflect the value that women tend to place on relationships. And it does need to recognize that for many women there are multiple demands that they have on them. So suggesting, you know, just go out and play golf for 2 hours before you get home from the office, Dr. Chika, may be incompatible with the many hats that you wear. And then I think finally, you know, like I said earlier, unfortunately, early research on certain disorders was, it didn't include women, and so our understanding of what they need for treatment protocols is a little bit behind. But I would just say that I think women do tend to be more self-berating and self-critical, and so it is important for whomever the clinician is to understand the demands and pressures that women face.
Thank you, Lana. I have another quick question. So,
Yes.
I mean, you've spoken extensively already about, you know, how to take care of ourselves mentally, and I mean, there's several things you mentioned when we think about the blue circle that we couldn't quite see the text. Yeah, when you think about that, that slide. Yeah, but one thing that we seem to have been missing is, how do we know the first signs that our mental health is deteriorating?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at that. Number one, if you start to notice that things are starting to seem more difficult or slower in any of those domains, that can be a sign that the wheels are coming off the truck. But the reason relationships are so important is because sometimes you don't know that you're in the middle of a storm. You just think that's what the sky looks like. And it takes somebody from another town to say, did you know there was a tornado over you? And so feedback from others, you know, that's why when we were talking about when does it become a mental disorder, is when you start to notice that things are becoming increasingly difficult in the contexts that are relevant to your life, right? So if I know you run many businesses, you're a very busy lady, so if you started to notice, oh, I just can't get out of bed, and I'm just approaching my upcoming meeting with dread, and it's like, whoa, that's not how I normally feel going in. Like that would be a sign that you might be, there might be some imbalance in one of those circles that we talked about. But certainly if like a 12-year-old was like, you know, I've got a board meeting coming up and I'm feeling nervous. Okay, well, you're 12. You shouldn't be going to a board meeting, right? So it's age and stage dependent, but that feedback from others is also very important from what they are seeing in the areas of your life that they're most used to seeing you. Has something changed?
So how often are you suggesting is sufficient to constantly check in on your mental health? Like, is it something that you would do maybe at the end of every day, or on, you know, how often is this personal check-in on yourself?
Well, I think you raise a really interesting idea, which is becoming your own private investigator. And so I think it's always helpful to be able to name the feelings that you're noticing in yourself. But I would also say, in terms of, so to keep my license, I have to meet with the supervisor 10 times a year. Hello, if he's watching. And one of the things he told me was that know what your battery life is and proactively build in a day where you either book it off work or you plan something. And so for me, about every 8 weeks, Dr. Chika, I do have a day of indulgence where something fun's gonna happen, but it could be a day where I take the day off and I go for lunch or shopping, or it could be a day off where I take a fitness class in the middle of the day. But know your energy cycles. But yeah, every day is a good day to check in with yourself and say, how am I doing?
Excellent, thank you. Jennifer, I have another question for you. Yes. So one thing we've said over and over in your seminar is definitions of success is what we need to really kind of look at in order to maintain this work-life balance. I want to just share a quick story. So several years ago, when I was just trying to get into investment banking, there was a very widely known about opportunity that was just around the corner, right? And they said to everyone who was interested, you know, show up, you know, come in hand with your birth certificates, with your resumes, all these different documents, you know, just come prepared, right? That there will be several stages through the day, and then those who were kind of at the last bit, you know, would definitely stand a higher chance of securing the position. So I arrived there, and you know, there were, I want to say, hundreds of youth who had gathered, all anticipating that they qualified and they would eventually kind of get the job. And then someone comes out, you know, on a podium, and he just says, if you're over 25 years old, leave. That's what they said. If you're over 25 years old, leave. Now, for a person who has their own definitions of success, where to them, success is not how quickly they finish college, but that they actually finish. In a context like this, where age is critical, which means they expect that you should have finished college by a certain age, how do those two ideas marry? Because if we're saying to people, define your own success, how does that success tie into what society expects and what allows you to thrive, you know, outside of your mind, you know, where your own idea of success is? So if we're telling people that, you know, you can find work-life balance by defining your success, and then, you know, we're saying it should be irrespective of what society expects, but how do they compete in society, right? I don't know, do you understand my question?
I understand
Yeah, okay.
100%. And how I see it is that there's this general idea of what success is in society, but especially in the last 5 years, I would say there are so many companies, so many businesses, that it is their focus to create incredible culture, to really focus on mental health, to encourage work-life balance, because when their employees actually take the time to take care of themselves, they see them show up more profoundly in the workplace. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Your definition of success is not going to align with every single person or every single business that exists out there. But if that is that company's definition of success, what do you think it's going to be like working for them? Is it really somewhere that you want to work? Right? Just because we can get a job doesn't mean it's going to be a job that we want, that's going to actually serve us, that's going to help us grow and develop and be happy, contribute to our well-being. So we need to acknowledge and look at the different opportunities that exist out there. Oftentimes we see that just because we're not able to follow suit for a certain opportunity, well, then it's a failure. I'm a failure. It wasn't meant to be. No. What is the opportunity there? What is the other company that actually aligns more well with you, that's going to allow you to create your work-life balance, right? Or create that definition of success that you're striving for. Because if it's an exact opposite definition, it's not going to work.
Awesome, thank you, Lana. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's the only thing I would share is like, there's a really, he's now passed away, but this really neat therapist, Michael White, who talked about stories, and he says each of us has a story that has been told about us, and now we tell it about ourselves. It could be that you're clumsy, or you're not successful, or you know, that you're not good enough, and we call those thin descriptions. So if anybody is watching tonight who has a thin description, my challenge to you would be to write it on a sheet of paper where only you can see, and then on a separate sheet of paper, I encourage you to take a few minutes to write as much as you want about the story you wish to tell, and then commit to noticing things for the next week or two that support the new story. And when you reach the end of that trial period, take the old one, crumple it up. I was going to say throw it out, but I'm an environmentalist. Put it in the blue bin and recycle it, but get rid of it. It doesn't serve you, and the challenge is that when we hang on to those thin descriptions, lo and behold, we tend to notice things that support it. So who says you are unsuccessful? Whose voice needs to replace that one? Hear it now, hear it tonight, and commit to just hearing that one on the go forward.
Wow, excellent, Lana, thank you. I have another question, Jennifer. So something else you mentioned was really about, kind of being more introspective about what satisfies you, right? But I've read research that says that many times burnout is, people should tend to focus more on the external things, because we're finding ourselves wanting to measure up against what people's expectations are. Just if you cast your mind back to our last question where we're talking about success, in whose eyes, on whose terms, right? So the research was talking about how, many times we kind of, the way we handle burnout or the way we think about burnout is thinking about the things that we're either mentally carrying that we can't quite talk about, so it now comes to overpower us and starts to weigh on us, versus thinking about the things that we can control, that we can see physically, that are tangible and are easier to handle. Because I don't know how many people are very comfortable kind of saying, you know what, the way my thoughts aren't quite in order. I don't know many people who can kind of figure out when they're in those conditions, except maybe those who are trained to do that, So it's a very special skill for someone to begin to feel like there's something off with their mental wellness. But the research was saying that we should be more external when we think about burnout and focus on the things that we can see, we can handle, we can change, versus that time kind of wondering whether are we thinking of things the right way, are we being mentally drained. Some people can tell. So I don't know, what are your thoughts about that? Like, is this something that we need to kind of really, consider more, or be more introspective like you've been saying all evening?
I really believe in the power of both.
Okay.
So the last time that I had burnt out, one of the first things that I did was also introducing a rock solid morning routine that was dedicated to me, right? So I was saying before that my definition of success was simply showering, putting makeup on, and doing my hair. Well, it didn't really feel like self-care. It was just another duty, something to get done, to go out to work and look good, right? But when I got serious and I was like, okay, enough is enough, I truly need to implement self-care, and I know that I thrive when I am using my body, when I am active. And it had been a long time since I had been active. So my morning routine came, okay, I'm gonna start waking up an hour earlier every morning. And no, I'm not a morning person. I hate the morning. But I knew that I needed that time for me before the rest of the house stirred, before my 2 boys woke up. And so I started to work out in the morning. I learned and I took a course on how to meditate. And yes, many people still think, that it's like some woo-woo thing, but there's science behind meditation, right? And even just sitting and allowing your body to be calm and in stillness and accepting that you're still valuable even though you're not getting stuff done, that's a big deal in itself. I'm a big believer in journaling. So, we talk about how sometimes you have to, maybe be a therapist to really have that introspect. Yeah, that helps, but it's actually through practice that is the most successful, right? So for me, I journal daily, every single night. And it's not a long thing. Literally, it will be 5 minutes, sometimes maybe 2 minutes. What am I feeling about today? What can I celebrate? And what can I learn? Right? And when we really, and sometimes it's just, or even if I'm feeling really emotional, sometimes I might do it in the middle of the day. What am I feeling right now? That's it. And then the quest is to show up without judgment, right? Journaling is not to show up perfectly and have the most prettiest writing so that you can show it on Instagram. That's not what it's about. It's about getting out what's inside of you. And our brain actually processes information differently when we write it down versus when we try and keep it in our head, right? It forces us to slow down. And the insight that I get from when I journal, it does not happen when I try and think it in my head. So I had an instance where I had a really stressful moment. There was something that I'd been working really hard towards, and it did not go in even like the middle perfectionist ground that I was hoping for. And so there was a lot of disappointment. And I remember sitting downstairs with the family, but I'm not in the moment, right? As you were saying, we're watching a movie and all I'm thinking about was, oh my gosh, I could have done this and I can't believe it turned out that way. And so what did? I I went upstairs, I grabbed the journal, and a couple hours of ruminating thoughts were done in 10 minutes.
Wow.
And there was like incredible clarity. And I'm not saying that this is going to work for you if this is the first time or the first 5th time that you've journaled. But if you do it on a regular basis and you show up with compassion.
It helps you kind of unpack, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it helps you unpack, it helps you process, it helps you understand and learn in a completely different way. And it doesn't have to be a complex question. What am I feeling right now? Right? What can I celebrate from today? What can I learn? I highly recommend journaling.
Yeah, I think those 3 questions are fantastic, actually. I've made a mental note. What am I feeling? What can I celebrate? What can I learn? Fantastic. Lana, you have my next question.
Yes.
I mean, if you just look at studies from, current studies, you see that there's people in certain roles who tend to have more issues with mental health. And one of those areas are like mostly in career, because there's so much competition, right? Versus people who are building businesses who realize I have my own pace,
Okay.
so they can kind of manage the speed with which they're moving, versus in a large institution where people are constantly vying for positions, right?
Right.
So, there's people who are watching who are in different kind of professions,
Yeah.
So, are there areas where people need to pay more attention to when they're in those professions, versus others where, I'm not saying it becomes less important, but, it's less dominant, I want to say. Because, let me give you a quick example. I have a friend who works in an oil company, and just the pressure to rise in rank is so profound. He literally left home one morning to jog on his regular trail, and had a stroke and passed away. So yeah, when he was found, there were all kinds of questions about his blood pressure. His wife was saying that he had been off all week. I think it was also the period of promotion and bonuses, and it was high tension. So, how are there areas where you feel like people need to be more mindful than in others, right?
Yeah, well, I think there are certainly some careers where being able to clock long hours, perform with very little sleep, and carry a very high stakes set of risks and responsibilities. There are some industries where if you can do that, you will excel.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I certainly don't want to pretend that isn't a reality. I think what I would offer and what I would suggest is, I think whatever you choose to do, like I remember when I was choosing between a couple of jobs, and I called a lady who's been a mentor throughout my career, is she said, whatever you do, Lana, make sure that you love and enjoy it. Because if you love and enjoy it, it won't feel burdensome, and the money will come.
Right.
And so, to be fair, I think there are some people who love that pace.
Pressure.
However, I think there are many who also embrace the cost that comes to them in relationships, because they're doing it to make others happy, or because they think that is what they can contribute to the people they love. And I certainly don't want it to be too stereotypical, but I do think for some men, their financial contribution is something that they place a high premium on. And meanwhile, their kids or their partner might say, spend more time.
Exactly.
So I think, obviously, if you love what you're doing, don't you want to make sure you have the ability to do it for as long as possible, which means you're going to need to make some decisions. But similarly, I think if you're doing something that's really taking a toll on you out of a sense of obligation, I would just say maybe check out those assumptions.
Right.
And the only thing I would add, Dr. Chika, is when I was a family counselor, I really pushed myself in ways that certainly got me a reputation as being a high producer, very good therapist. But one of the pediatricians pulled me aside one day and said, just remember that if you weren't asked to do it and you did it anyways, it's not going to impress anybody. So all of a sudden, those long hours and taking on attention, I was like, you know, to quote one of my favorite mental health experts, Snoop Dogg, I dropped it like it was warm. I'm teasing, but certainly I thought that was really good advice. If no one asked you to do it and you're suffering here, it's not going to score you any additional points. And when I was able to let that go, I was just kind of more pleasant to be around.
Wow. Wow. Thanks, Lana. That's that's definitely something to take away.
You didn't think Snoop Dogg was going to get meant, and I'm not even sure that I should have, but he just comes to mind sometimes.
Yeah. My next question is something that I feel like many of us here may have suffered from at some point. A lot of us can't let go of the things we don't do well. Ooh. Yeah. I'm one of those people, like I'm literally the father of perfectionism over here. You know, like I always want things to go a certain way, and not to control them, but I want my output to be its best. So, like, just to give you an example of how serious this affects me mentally, is when I read texts that I sent and I find that there were typos, it hurts me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it just shows you that if text can bother me, how much more when I send official emails and I feel like I left a word out or something isn't properly spelled. You know, so a lot of us deal with those things where we don't want to, we're not imposing it on anybody else. We have a very high standard for ourselves in what we deliver. You know, and also having a track record, like you say, Lana, although you might not be overworking anymore like you used to, but you still have a standard with which people have come to know you in terms of your delivery. You know, so any day that drops, there's a way you feel and you carry that burden, right? So I think maybe more practical steps on how to really let things go will be very helpful, you know?
If I can answer with a very short story, I remember when I became a supervisor, one of the tasks that we often had was just to get patients into the clinic faster, meaning we had to do our assessments. You know, you'd interview people and then generate a report saying, here's what they should do. And I remember, you know, the team I was supervising, they were taking a little bit longer than the manager was happy with. So he said, we need to figure this out, Lana. And I, as the supervisor, said, you know what? I have this brilliant idea. Why don't I do some intakes and type the reports and just show the team how easy it is to get these done quickly. So, you know, I took the day and I interviewed all the families, and I'm like sitting with the team and I'm like, boom, typed out another one, boom, look at how quickly I did this, look, I'm doing this, I'm role modeling. And so everybody was like, oh, thanks, Lana. And so one of the staff, and I remember her distinctly, when people left the office, she closed the door and said, can I tell you something? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. And she said, I know what you're trying to do, but instead of creating an impossibly high standard, what we would have preferred to hear was how you tolerated it when you felt like you were drowning in your work. And what I realized was that by owning my imperfection, it actually allowed people to relate with me in a different way. I didn't relax my standards, but I shifted my emphasis, and I realized that my need to be perfect and have control is because I was working in a clinic with a diagnosis that has among the highest mortality rate in psychiatry. And I couldn't necessarily get the patients to gain weight or eat. I couldn't control what they did evenings and weekends, but I could be the best report writer. So there was an unmet need that I was filling with my perfectionism. And I do want to say, I think you have a very diverse group of people who come to you for counsel in these workshops. I do think for some women who come from groups where perhaps there are stereotypes and people don't expect that much from them, that also fuels the need to try and overcompensate by being absolutely perfect. I know it did for me for a lot of my career when I was the only black person in the room and the only black woman. And so, you know, I sort of made a decision of, rather than striving to be perfect because there were no role models, I just decided to become one myself. And it's like, and you know what makes a person a good role model is if you have an overcoming adversity story. So now I don't sweat the small stuff. But I am going to be more careful if I ever get a text from you. No, I'm just going to use emojis, because then there's no punctuation or grammar, right? I'm going to break your microphone with my laugh.
Thanks, Lana. So we're already our time is far spent. We have literally 5 more minutes. So I want to ask you for any last words, Jennifer. Maybe something you really think that we should take away tonight, just in case you hadn't mentioned it before, but it's critical for us to really grasp necessity of work-life balance, or how to achieve it, or how to measure, certain things in our lives when they're not going the way they should, or when they're doing well. Whatever you think is very critical knowledge that we should take away tonight.
What's coming through for me right now is, it might sound silly, and it might not even sound like I'm answering your question, but I truly believe this, and I've seen it over and over, is that know your worth. When you know your worth, and when you know your value, you can show up completely different. You might not stress over the text message, or you might not feel like you have to prove your value by working 16-hour days, or prove your value by, if I don't get into that program, then, I'm not good enough. And it's easy to say, know your worth. It's not always easy to actually feel that. Sometimes we know it, but we don't feel it. And if we don't feel it, that changes how we show up. And if you don't feel it, find somebody. Maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's a coach. It doesn't matter who it is, but find someone to help you work through that, because the sooner that you do, the sooner you're going to be able to become your own self and embrace that, right? Like, that's the biggest difference that I've seen too, is that I spent most of my life I knew in my head, but I didn't feel it in my body that I was worthwhile, that I was worthy, right? And so I kept trying to prove myself through all of these different ways. But when I fully just became comfortable because I did the inner work, that's when I stopped having to prove myself, stopped having to work crazy long days. And oh my God, it was really freeing. It's like taking a whole bunch of weights off of your shoulder. So I don't know if that makes sense for your question,
No.
but it's what really hits for me.
Absolutely, know your worth.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's something to take away for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just thinking about the statement, I'm very happy you kind of shed more light on it, just rather than just throw it out there. Because, I think that's where imposter syndrome comes in, because many times we wonder whether those jobs or those positions that we get selected for, we are really qualified to handle them, right, So, and that's where knowing our worth is. Like, if people outside can tell that you're the perfect man for the job, why don't you feel that way? So I think that's definitely something for us to think about, knowing our worth. Thanks, Jennifer. Lana, do you have anything that you want to?
No, others than to say thank you for inviting me tonight, and it was really great sharing this space with you, Jennifer, as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I guess I would just say, be yourself. I think the people around you like it that way.
Oh, thank you so much. Can we put our hands together for the speakers? So in our typical WTAL fashion, we don't like our speakers to leave without taking away something to remember us by.
Ooh, a swag bag.
Yeah, yes.
And you know I love my bags, right?
Yeah, so we want to present you a little thank you gift.
Oh, thank you. You didn't have to do this.
We think we do.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Dr. Chika.
Lana.
It's very thoughtful of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Yeah.
Chika,
Can we
and
put
the
our hands
team
together
too.
for them?
Thank you guys.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Lana, thank you. We hope you can
Most
come back
wel-
again
my pleasure.
soon.
Yeah, I hope
Jen,
to.
we'd like to see you again as soon
Yes.
as possible. So thanks, guys. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for coming,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.